You are at Lake Rant, where I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one's for Languid Landscape Lad, who says, "Rant about why I hate your name, Kimi no Nawa," by Goat Jesus. So I just watched this video, and I thought it was fairly interesting. I think that it's somewhat of a confused video, perhaps in a way similar to the movie itself, in that it has an odd sense of pacing and a sort of chaotic structure. What I mean by this is that when Go Jesus is just talking about problems that he has with the movie, I think that they are reasonable problems to have. And obviously, if these things bothered you, you're not going to enjoy the movie. When he talks about it not having a very fleshed out romance, for instance, I don't think he did the best possible job of explaining what was wrong with it just by talking about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I didn't think that was that interesting of a comparison between the movies, but I liked when he talked about the lack of exploring the character's past and how it could have been done better, which is an interesting idea. But I also think it's somewhat dangerous to critique a work based on what's not in it as opposed to what is, just because it's like we get further away from like the intentionality of the creator. Like, was this meant to be a romance movie? Was it meant to have that as like a key part, or is that more of like the second string, element of the movie? I mean, you could say that it's bad to even include it and not do it well, or to not flesh out these particular elements of these characters. But like, I think the characters in Your Name are relatable enough. I think we learn enough about them to connect with them as people and to watch their story play out. I agree with him that the characterization is very all over the place. Particularly the point he brings up about how Taki, the guy, like isn't particularly like a super masculine character, but when he's in the girl's body, he starts having all these like sort of masculine stereotypes. But then at the same time, I also thought that part of the point of that was that he just thought of that as a way of correcting the problems in her life. That like the things she was dealing with were things that he, could sort of deal with in a different way by using the things he understands as a man. Not necessarily that it's just his personality coming through, so much as him deliberately trying to do that. Whereas in the other case, it was more of like her personality just bleeding through. That's the way I remember it. I haven't seen this movie since I did my own video about it in the Makoto Shinkai big analysis. But I still think it's an interesting point, and I think there's a bunch of interesting points throughout this video. But it also felt weirdly like I couldn't tell if this was supposed to just be, as the title says, why I hate Kimi no Nawa, so much as why Kimi no Nawa isn't good. And I think that those are kind of two different arguments, and there's elements of both of them in here. Because if we're talking about why the movie doesn't endear you to its characters, why the movie, doesn't have a good romance, why you think that elements of the plot were not fleshed out well enough, or the themes were not delivered on well enough, those are all good reasons to hate the movie. But it also doesn't address the things that are good about the movie that other people think are good. So there is one part where he kind of does that, though, where he talks about how other people seem to have praised the movie for its gender dynamics, and then goes on this long breakdown of why he thinks the movie doesn't have good or interesting gender dynamics. But I couldn't really get a sense of, is this a problem he has with the movie? It seemed more like he was saying, like, it's not that he considered it such a big deal as that he was refuting that as an argument for why the movie is good. And if you want to go down that road, there's so many arguments for what's good about the movie that you could address. It just seems odd to fixate on that one unless it just was something that really did bother him, which maybe it was. But like, he didn't present it as much that way, as like, here's a counter argument to things people like about the movie. Similarly, when he talked about the themes and the idea of it as a Sekai anime. Like, he doesn't go into that much depth about what people think the film has to say. What does it have to say about disaster according to other people, and why are they wrong? So much as just sort of addressing that this is something people like about the movie, but he doesn't think that it, goes in that much depth themes. So it was an odd kind of bouncing back and forth, and like I didn't disagree with him on really almost anything in terms of like, yeah, these are valid criticisms on some level. Some of them, are taste differences. I thought the boob grabbing joke was funny every time it came up. Obviously, he didn't. And I don't love this movie either. I gave it like a 7 out of 10. I think the script is very chaotic. I think that the reason it has these problems that Ghost Jesus is talking about is because it's just so loosely structured. It's so fucking long. It needed to be tightened up. It needed to be reworked. I feel like this movie needed a few more rewrites to become a great movie. But I also think there's a lot to like about this movie. I mean, he doesn't even get into the visual department really. He doesn't really get into that much of the sonic element. Even he doesn't talk about the moments that seem to click with a lot of people. I mean, he does touch on the montages and basically say like, I appreciate why people would enjoy this, but I don't really. It's this odd back and forth of things that bothered me versus things that other people liked and I didn't think were good. And I would have, I guess I would have appreciated it being either all one way or all the other. Like, either the video could have been, this is just what I don't like about this movie, but I appreciate why you guys like it, or let me present counter arguments to every argument I've ever heard about what makes this movie good. And it just seemed odd to me that there were counter arguments for certain things, but not necessarily other things, or not really addressing what people like about the movie, or just, maybe tallying up all the things people like, all the things you don't like, and then coming to a conclusion about whether you think, which one outweighs the other. Obviously, he thinks the bad outweighs the good, but without really presenting what people consider to be the good, it's hard for me to come away feeling like, yeah, you're right. The bad does outweigh the good, Like, ultimately, in my opinion, I think the good outweighs the bad, and it's a good movie. It's an enjoyable film. When he said, I don't think it'll stand the test of time, I think that's, he compared it at one point to Titanic, and I mean, Titanic is a movie that may not be as critically beloved as it was at the time. It may not still remain like something that people return to all the time, but I wouldn't say it's fair to say it has not stood the test of time. And I think Kimi no Nawa will occupy a similar place in culture as, at the very least, a very nostalgic film that's easy to return to. I mean, it's an entertaining movie. It's not boring. It's not overly frustrating. Unless, like, in the case of Goji's, I really feel like a lot of what he wanted from the movie was stuff that it's understandable to want those things, but it's just not what the movie is. And, like, fixating on what's not in the movie as opposed to what is there, again, I think is a difficult kind of argument to make, because it's like we could always talk about what could be in a movie. Anything could be in there. I mean, if you have an idea of how the script could have been tighter, you're always going to be thinking about, how would I have done it? But, it doesn't necessarily mean that what is there is bad just because it could have been better with something new added in. So, yeah, interesting points. But overall, I felt like I wasn't sure how to come away from this video. I definitely thought that some of his arguments were, like, I don't know if I was, like, convinced per se, as, like, I agreed, as somebody who, again, is not the hugest fan of this movie, but it ultimately did not make me come away feeling like Kimi no Nawa was any worse of a movie than I thought it was. It made me come away feeling like, okay, yeah, those are valid criticisms, but there's other things to like about the movie that this video did not address that, that would be in another video, which is fine. I mean, obviously all the different videos can exist at the same time. But if I had to imagine why this video has such a huge dislike bar, that would probably be the reason.